Just while I'm getting this started, this is a webinar that we of course record, and we will make the recording available tomorrow, latest on Friday, via our YouTube channel and also on our website. As I experienced some voice issues in one of my last webinars and seem to have some PowerPoint issues with this time. So can you please confirm in the comments of this webinar that you can hear me and that you can see my screen? That would really help me a lot. So if you could quickly type into the chat if you hear me and if you can see my slide, and it's the title slide for this webinar. Okay, I see some feedback coming. All good, all good, all good, all fine. Okay, perfect. So thank you. Thanks, I got it. Thank you very much. So then let's get this going. And I will run through the slides from here because I had some issues with the presenting mode over here. So as I said, this is a webinar. We will definitively record it and make it available afterwards. If you have any question during the webinar, then type it into the chat pane, as you right now did successfully, to tell me that you can hear me. I will either answer your question right away, or I will answer it whenever I finished a demo. But definitely I will answer all the questions in this meeting, or then refer to a meeting, a separate meeting, separate email afterwards. So to put this webinar into perspective, this is a webinar in which I focus feature and functions of our products, and it is a webinar, I would say, for not necessarily for advanced people, but it is not a beginner's webinar. So it is a webinar where it is useful that you are at least a bit familiar with our products, because I will not introduce all the products. I will not introduce how the products overall work, but I will just speak about what is new. So I will elaborate on a couple of new features. So with this, we are on a release path where we release a new version of our extension like every quarter. And this has gotten some clockwork-wise execution, which I like. So with the VAPS, we just end of June launched the version 1.14. If you're and with VPS and VJS, we launched version 1.19. And so if you are on older versions, then please make sure that you update accordingly, or update your customers accordingly. All new versions are available both on AppSource and in our Teams-based partner communities for VPS and VJS on the one hand side, and for VAPS on the other hand of side. As always with the versions, we try to include bug fixes, features and function, and also always like internal work on the performance and stability. Whenever we release a version, it's sent to AppSource. And once we have it approved, we put it out on our partner portals. And of course, we always like when we get ideas from you, and some of the stuff that was implemented last quarter and now shipped also came from discussions and from requirements that you guys had. So thanks for this. And I think in essence, building against and for your requirements and for building for your ideas is always better than if we come up with our ideas on our own, because in the end, the ideas that you have, these are the ideas that either your customers or you are the customers that help make your lives easier. Since a while, we also apply Microsoft's modern lifecycle. That means we do not develop new functions for every version of Business Central that ever existed. So we always develop a new function just for the latest PC version, and we continue to cover the previous two versions. So what we just shipped now is available for Business Central 22, 21, and 20. These new features are no longer available for older versions. This is just because Microsoft makes so many breaking changes that we can't cope with making everything backward compatible. Plus, we all see that there is a value in having all environments always more or less current. So with the version that we just shipped, or with the versions that we just shipped, and I make it quite explicit here, the supported versions are BC 22, 21, and 20. The big focus was on the VAPS. Actually, we didn't ship any new function for the VJS. We just did actually a lot of bug fixing, did a lot of housekeeping and cleaning. With the VPS, the product is, I would say, almost ready. I would say so. We do not expect any major new features there, because the VPS is the VPS as it was already for nav, mirroring what you can do with standard Business Central manufacturing. And I think to a certain degree, we are almost ready with the product. So we keep it, we maintain it, we make it like faster, we streamline it when we have some but there are little new ideas that would apply for the VPS, because those new ideas are things that would make the VPS different than standard Business Central, and the things that make scheduling different than Business Central, they all go into the VAPS. So we added the comfort function to navigate within one routing, the same that I presented to you 3 months ago, because we introduced it in the VAPS, and we actually thought, okay, this is a cool thing to also have in the VPS. So this should be, and this is the way forward. And we also had, in some cases, when we moved things to the left, and there were like really a complex routing, and we had to backward schedule, which is possible in Business Central, which is possible in the VPS as well. We had to backward schedule a lot of operations. Then we saw some performance hiccups and we improved them. But the rest, like, all went into the VAPS, where we made a lot of really cool things. So there is one, we also, as you know, we have an API for all of our extensions, and we enhanced the VAPS API by a new event. And this new event, actually, it is 4 lines on this slide, but it was a major enhancement, major development, because you know that with Business Central, you can have production order lines made dependent of each other through a reservation entry. So when you have a make-to-order production order, and you have all these indented production order lines, then they are connected with each other behind the scenes through the reservation table. And also, if you have a production order for a subassembly and you have a separate production order for the final product, you can reserve the subassembly quantity, so the subassembly production order, for the final production order. But this always works through the reservation entries through table 337. And if you make your production order lines dependent from each other through the reservation entry table, then of course we take this dependency into account within the VAPS. So now we have customers, and we also know that we have partners who are not the biggest fans of the reservation entries, and who build their own logic, their own fields, their own functionality to make production orders or production lines dependent from each other. So if you have this, if you have your own mechanism independent of the reservation entries to make production orders or production order lines being dependent on each other, then with this new event, you can actually feed in your information on production order line dependencies into the VAPS, and then we treat the information we get from you as if they were reservation entries, and then we keep this custom dependency based on non-reservation entries. We treat this also as dependencies within the VAPS. So this is quite significant. There's nothing I can show you. I just can explain you how it works. But the other things are features that I can show you, and I listed them for the sake of completion, all of them. But I will, in the demo in the next couple of minutes, I will focus on those here that are also marked in bold here. And I will start with a feature that we added, and this is related to the functionality that we call EMAT. EMAT stands for Earliest Material Availability Date. So with the VAPS, we have the capability to calculate a date that we call the earliest material availability date, and we calculate this on the production order level, on production order line level, on production order routing line level, if you work with routing link codes, and also on production order component level. And the EMAT calculation, so the calculation of the earliest material availability date, is when the supply comes from a purchase order, then the EMAT looks at the expected receipt date, because the expected receipt date in the purchase order is a must field, and hence we decided to base the EMAT algorithm on the expected receipt date. However, we know that there are some manufacturers out there who have very sensitive supply chains, and supply chains also where maybe their suppliers are not as reliable as they should be. And we know that if this is the case, and if delivery dates for incoming components and items are not yet confirmed, customers do not want to schedule already a production order, because if you schedule a production order, you reserve capacity for it. Ultimately, you schedule capacity through this production order. And if you reserve, like if you add a production order to capacity, and if you take this capacity, literally schedule this capacity to that production order, then you can't use the same capacity for another production order. And if you schedule, if you allocate this capacity to a production order for which you not yet have confirmed delivery dates, then this can be misleading. So we have these customers who say, hey, we only want to schedule those production orders where we have fully confirmed delivery dates by our suppliers. And so far, this use case was not supported with the VAPS, because we were always looking at the expected receipt date and ignored the promised receipt date. So with the new function now, we can enable the VAPS to consider the promised receipt date. And when we say we consider the promised receipt date, then we consider it by a variety of functionality. So first, we have now the option to treat in the scheduling production orders differently when they have components that don't have a promised delivery or promised receipt date. We recognize in the EMAT calculation that this is the case. So in the EMAT calculation, we recognize that the promised receipt date is missing, and hence we enhanced the availability color mode in a way that it does no longer differentiate between green and red, but it also shows orange, and orange is meant as the color to show those production orders where the promised receipt date is missing. Those production orders where the promised receipt date is missing, they can still get added individually, so via drag and drop or via the apply routing function to the schedule. Because ultimately with the VAPS, we follow the idea that the planner knows best, and if they want to drag and drop a production order to the schedule, although the promised receipt date is missing, then this is fine. But when we go for scheduling efficiency and when we hit the at all function, then the production order remain on standby if it does not have the promised receipt date. And likewise, there can be the fact that you scheduled a production order, it is already to a machine, and then your supplier calls you and tells you, look, we gave you this delivery date, but we need to take away our promise, and it will take us another 2 or 3 days before we can promise you a new delivery date. And then you would remove the promised receipt date from the purchase order, and then we have the function also to move back a production order to standby when promised receipt date are missing. And with this, I want to switch to the first demo for today. Log into Business Central again, and first of all do a new EMAT allocation. So I now, with the production orders I have in there, I calculate the earliest material availability dates because I want to use them as a restriction for scheduling. And under the VAPS setup, under the material availability, let me reduce everything else. Under the material availability, I now have switched on this function exclude not fully promised receipt date from automatic functions like act all. So this means that this function by default is switched off. You need to switch it on. And this means that now I will treat those production orders that have components without a promised receipt date. I will treat those production orders differently. So now I already had this switched on when I calculate EMAT, and hence I have all the information I need. So now I can create a simulation. I say I want to look at the simulation in the availability view so that I get on first hands, when I look at the schedule visually, I get information about material availability, and then I view at the simulation. And it takes a minute or two, depending on the volume of your data. Here we go. And now I see my screen in what is called the availability color scheme. So green are those production orders where I don't have an issue with material availability. Red are those production orders where that are scheduled with a start date before the earliest material availability date. So this has been functionality of the VAPS for all the time. But now I have this one in orange and this production order here in orange. And these are production orders without without a promised receipt date. So let's look at this in detail. So let's look at this production order for item 22. And I double click on this and it's on the standby resource. So now I double click on this. And we see it has an earliest material availability. So the earliest material availability has been set to the 20th of February. Now, if I look at the production order component lines, then I see I need those 4 components here. And we added a new column to this production order component table. And this is the promised receipt date missing. So here for the first 3 item, it says no, so which means I have the promised receipt date, or this is on stock. But for the last one, I say yes, and this means the earliest material availability date that was calculated is on the 20th of February, but the promised receipt date is missing. So let's look at this item where we got this information from and where we got this information from. So let's go to the item card to understand what happens and happened. And I see I have a demand on component line 110, I think, from this production order. Let me quickly go back. The demand for that production order was 50. So I have 2 production orders that I seem to have 2 production orders that require this item. So here from this production order, I have a demand of 50. And I see on a quantity, on a purchase order, I got 110, I have nothing on inventory. So if I look at the supply, it's a purchase order, then we see the purchase order has an expected receipt date of the 20th of February. So this is what we put in the respective column as earliest material availability date, because I don't have this on stock, I don't produce it. So this purchase order is my only supply for that item. And so if this is my only supply and if I have nothing on stock, then the earliest date that this is available is the 22nd of February. So now if I look at the purchase order, there is an expected receipt date, and this expected receipt date typically is populated when you run, for example, when you create the purchase order from the planning worksheet, and you have the expected receipt date based on the lead time that you put to the item. But the promised receipt date is blank. So my vendor, TexPro Maroc, hasn't given me a promised receipt date yet. So I know it should be here by them, but they didn't confirm this date to me. So I have this empty. And because I have this empty, we have here the promised receipt date missing, and as yes, and if there is at least one production order component line where I have a minimum of one yes here, then we mark the respective production order in the VAPS in orange. And when I now want to schedule everything, that I have on the standby resource, then I can, for example, say action schedule add all, and then I add them all, and then you will recognize that we will schedule everything that is on the standby resource here, but this one wasn't scheduled, because with the new functionality, we say we will not schedule. If you switch this on the VAPS setup, as I did, then this tells you we will not schedule this production order if there is no promised receipt date. So as long as your supplier hasn't confirmed the delivery of the items that you need for production, as long we won't schedule them with the add all functionality. But Planner knows best. Of course, I can go and move it to here, right? I can go and say, okay, I want to schedule it to that machine that day, and I want to schedule this to the saw, whatever, here. So you can do drag and drop. Planner knows best. But for the algorithm, for the automatic scheduling, we would take it out from the scheduling as long as the supplier hasn't confirmed the delivery. And now you see I have this production order on the standby resource, and I have this on the LC 180 and on the saw, and I have this here on the CTX 400. And this is something where maybe yesterday I had a promise received it, and then the vendor called and stepped away from his or her commitment. And if I don't want to have them in the schedule, then I can say action schedule, move to standby, move operations without fully promised receipt dates to standby, and then all those orange ones will go back to standby now. Also this, which was scheduled earlier, and this is also back to standby now, because I don't want to schedule capacity to those production orders because I don't have a confirmed delivery date. And by default, we treat every item like this, but if you think for some items you really don't care if you have a promised receipt date of your supplier or not, then on the item card, and now let's look on the item card. On the item card, let's go to the bike. On the item card, you can actually say, I want to ignore the promised receipt date. So I can say, okay, I don't care about the promised receipt date. Bikes, you can get a bike everywhere, right? In these days, where people drive more a bike than a car, you can get a bike everywhere. So I can get this from this supplier, that supplier. They are not critical. And if the one buyer doesn't confirm it, I get it elsewhere. So I don't care if I got a promised receipt date or not. I get this all the time. Then you can flag this, and then we will schedule it nonetheless. But if you have items in your supply chain, in your manufacturing process, where you say, hey, if the vendor hasn't confirmed their promised receipt date, then you should switch on the new function on the VAPS setup, so that then those production orders will not get scheduled if the vendor hasn't confirmed the dates. So this is something where we think we made a good, this is a good addition to the VAPS, given that we have a lot of volatility and, let's say, less reliability in a lot of supply chains with our customers and with their customers. And with this, you can react to this. And with this, you can say, okay, I want to make sure that I only schedule those production orders where I have all the receipt dates confirmed by my supplier. So where I have planning security from the supplier side of things, then I will add them to the schedule, but not earlier. And this is what we did with this new functionality. Then the next bigger enhancement is that we enhance the add all function. So with the add all function, and I just executed the add all function in the VAPS a couple of minutes ago. With the add all function, we trigger a priority-based scheduling of all new production orders. So why do we need this, and why do we need the standby resource? Just as a quick reminder, Business Central by default plans and schedules backwards with the assumption of infinite capacity. So which means you get an unrealistic schedule. You get a schedule where everything is on time, but where resources are, or machine center work centers are massively overloaded. With the VAPS, we do a forward scheduling against finite capacity. And so whenever you create a production order in Business Central, it ends up on the standby resource. So it tells you as the planner that you need to add this new production order to the realistic schedule that you maintain with the VAPS against finite capacity. And the add all function adds all those production orders that are on the standby resource to the schedule, and it does it in a priority-based way. However, so far, like the assignment of the priority to a single production order was always and only done by our scheduling algorithm. So when you click the add all function so far, like with our scheduling algorithm, we calculated a priority for production order, and then we had to clear and unique list, a priority-based list of production orders, and then we added the production orders to the schedule by this priority. However, we regularly faced we regularly met customers who said, okay, this is cool, but we would like to take influence on the priority. And in some cases, they said, okay, now I have 10 production orders on the standby resource, but I first want to add those two because those are the most important, and I want to add them first so that they get the capacity, the available capacity as early as possible. And after that, I want to add the rest, and then I don't care. So you just wanted to take influence on the priority, and sometimes they also didn't want to schedule everything that was on the standby resource, but only a few production orders. So we implemented a couple of new options. So we have the options now to say we want to add all to the schedule, but we want to add all from production orders that we select. So we want to have a list of production orders. We want to sort this list, and then we want to select which production orders we want to add. And likewise, we also want to be able to do this not only production order centric, but sales order centric. We want to say, okay, we have now 10 new sales orders in the system, and these 10 new sales orders have 40 production orders with it. And we want to decide basically which is the most important customer, which customer's production orders we want to schedule first. And then when we do this, we always did this in a way that we support the add all function, but that we also support the add all function taking into account the alternative work and machine centers. So just for those of you who haven't heard about this before, with the VAPS, we actually can define alternate work and machine centers so that if you have two drilling machines, and if the one drilling machine is busy and the other could do the job as well, then we automatically would assign the work to the drilling machine that is capable of doing the work or finishing the work at earliest, and not necessarily to the one that is defined in the routing. But with this, now let's go back to how we enhance the add all function. Let's go back to a demo, and let's look at Business Central again, and we go back to the VAPS, and just let me create a new simulation. And now I select the default view color type, the progress view. And with the progress view, we immediately recognize things that are late and things that are in time. And I viewed the simulation. So the availability color scheme gives us information about timing material issues, and the progress view gives us information about timing issues. So let's open this. And again, we have the same schedule as before, but now colored differently. Green are those that are in time. Orange are those where we have the risk that they started too late. So this is, here's the work date. This is today, this is the 31st of January. This one was meant to start the day before yesterday to finish yesterday. There is no posting. So there's a risk that it's late. So we mark this in orange. And then you see there are all of the standby. Of course, they are green because they were scheduled by Business Central backwards against infinite capacity. So typically things on the standby resource are shown in green. So now what we can do is we can say, okay, now it is like as it is in Business Central, and we can say action, schedule, add all, and then we can add all from standby. This is how we had it before, or I can say add all including alternatives, add all from standby including alternatives. And if I do this, then I get a certain result. So we make a product, and you see we get some in red and some are late. So I can say, okay, well, you know, good. And now I could play with this and try to make it in time, but I let undo it now because now we have a new option. So now I can also say, okay, I still want to add them, including taking into account the alternative work and machine centers, but I only want to do this for selected production orders. And then if I do this, I get a list of all production orders that are on standby. And now I can filter here, or I can sort this list. So I can say, you see, I have only one released production order on standby and all the others are firm planned. So maybe I want to add the released production order first because this is the most concrete, independent of the due dates. So I say, okay, now I only select the released ones, and I could also multi-select. But now I just select the released one and say, I only want to schedule the released ones. And then I say, okay. And now I only schedule the released ones and I leave the firm planned on standby for the time being. So you saw one got moved. It is now it got scheduled here and still nothing red. Then I can say, okay, now I want to take all those that are firm planned on standby. And now I can think of what is my typically approach to scheduling. I can say, okay, I want to schedule those with low quantities first and then with high quantity. Or I want to say, okay, let's do the ones that have the biggest quantity first, because then once I'm done, I have time for the small orders. So now I can say, I want to add them all sorted by quantity. If I do this, then we schedule them in the sequence you select here, and you see again, I get a couple of them that are late. So maybe I say, okay, maybe this is not the best strategy. So how about schedule them by whatever? Schedule, add all, including alternatives. Say, let's schedule them when they are due. Let's put those to the schedule that is due at earliest, and then the next one, and so on and so forth. And then we can do it like this. And going forward, we will add more columns to this table so that you can apply more different strategies. And you see still there are 2 production orders that are late, but the rest is now in time. And we had much more late production orders before. So now I can say, okay, this one actually, well, it seems that there is a gap after production before assembly. So what happens if I accelerate this? And this one here, well, there is here a little bit of, but only a little bit late. Well, maybe if I just let them switch positions over there. So now this is in time and it didn't cause harm. So now let's look at this. Maybe after it comes from production, I want to schedule the successors. Okay, now you see another one turn red. So now you have the trade-off against finite capacity. Which one of this you run late? But as said, we will enhance those table by additional columns, and this means you will be able to apply different scheduling strategies. And now let me undo the last few changes that I made. And I'm getting too excited about the product, so I'm clicking too much. But let me undo it again, the next one, and now let me get them back to standby again. And also the released one back to standby. So this is where we started. And you now saw I could do it, the schedule, the efficient schedule at all with the selected production orders. Now all of them are back on standby. And I could also sort it differently. I could sort it by the current starting time as it is from Business Central. We could sort it by items, right? You can say, okay, I want to add production for those 2 items first. And then you cluster the next one. So you can actually do already now a couple of fancy things. But this is now by production order. But you now can also schedule by customer. You can do the same, that we actually go here and say, add all from selected sales orders. So now these are the 4 sales orders that include production orders, and even do not know right now if it is 10 production orders per sales order or 5 or 1. But what I see from here already, and I see the sales order status, and I see to which customer this is, right? And maybe I want to say, hey, actually, you know, I only want to schedule the release productions and the production orders for release sales orders. Why should I care in my production for production orders where the sales order still is open? I don't know. Or I say, well, now I have those 2 released production orders. This one is due later than that one. But you know what? Möbelscherer, they are my most important customer. And of course, me, I'm German, and this is the Möbelscherer AG. So maybe this is the most important customer. So I want to schedule all the production orders for that one customer first, and then I can select this, and then we add all the production orders that are under this sales order. We schedule them as soon as possible given the current capacity load. And then I can say, okay, now I deal with the production orders for the next customers and so on and so forth. So we really made the scheduling of new production orders much more flexible, and you get much more power here. You can select which production orders you schedule. You can select in which sequence. You can apply different scheduling strategies like low quantity first, high quantity first. Like you can do something like first in, first out. If you sort them by production order number, you can say, okay, I want to schedule those that are with the closest due date first. So you really can do some fancy stuff already. And as said, we will add functionality to this definitively. So this was another big development project we had over the last couple of weeks and months to kind of make this new function and to have it both by sales order and by production order. And then we also added a couple of more smaller functions that we included under the bigger term comfort function. So sometimes we learn from you guys, and thank you for making us aware of the fact that some of your customers or some of you guys who actually use the product want to make a more efficient use of functions that already exist. So example, we have the capability to pin a production or we had the capability to pin an operation, right? We could say right mouse click pin operation, and then we would freeze this operation. And I can show you quickly. We would freeze like this one. You see this log. We would freeze this operation, and it would not get moved around by any scaling. And just for continuing the demo of the comfort function, let me schedule all of them and old way, and then I change the color scheme to get some. But with the pinning, for example, we always could pin only one operation. And now let me change the coloring so that I get a little bit more contrast. And then back to the PowerPoint. Another example, if you have scheduled something and for some reason, as I showed you earlier, want to move it, so if I would want to move this red one now to standby, I would have to take every operation and move it manually back to standby. Sometimes if things happen, like if you get new information from your supplier or if other things happen, you might want to take production orders out of the schedule. And so this was another example. So we said, okay, we need to enhance options that we have on the right-click menu. And this refers like the process of pinning. And this also refers the process of moving to standby. And we now, for example, if this green production order here should not get changed by the scheduler, then we do not need to go right-click pin, but we can say right-click now, pin with capacity blocked, and then can I say, do I want to just pin this operation, or do I want to pin this entire production order line, or do I want to pin this entire production order? And if I pin this entire production order, then you see it is now locked. Now every operation of this production order is locked, and this production order now is pinned entirely, and it will not get moved by the VAPS anymore. And likewise, I can now say here, if I'm working here and I want to have more flexibility, I want to unpin, and then I unpin the production order, and then all those locks are gone. Likewise, if with this green production order something happened and I want to take it out of the plant to free the capacity for something else, then I can say right mouse click, move to standby, and then I can say, okay, I want to move this operation to standby, then the operation moves to standby. Or I can say, hey, I want to move the whole production order to standby, and then the entire production order is moved to standby, and we have all these little gaps now, and then we can try. Now I can here now right mouse click, say whatever, tighten Q on this machine center and bring in forward everything that now can you, and you see now this utilized the capacity that I freed up because I moved this up. And now I could do the same here, like tighten Q on this machine center, or I can do this now that I removed one production order from the schedule, freed up capacity, I can do this tighten Q for a lot of production orders in one go. And sometimes we have customers, they say, okay, actually, I need to plan a complete machine anew. So we can also say on a machine center or on a work center, I can say move, either I can say move unhandled future operations on this machine center to the past. So it will move every operation to the standby that has no posting, or like we have it here, if I do it, move unhandled past operation to machine center to standby, it moves this one to standby that has no posting. And now I can scale, and if there would be more, then I move them up. If it's for future operations that have no posting, then everything here that is on the machine you saw, boom, goes up to the standby, and now I can schedule it new. And likewise, I could say, and now I need the availability color scheme to find the orange one that is scheduled, this one, right? I can also say, hey, from this machine center, move all operations without fully promised receipt date to standby, and now the orange moved up. So now these are some comfort functions to get operations from a production order line, operations from one production order, to get all of them to stand by much easily, either by production order individually or by machine center or by work center. And likewise also with the pinning and unpinning, we just made the use more efficient so that you can pin an entire production order with one interaction and do not have to pin each of the operations individually. So these were a couple of more comfort functions, and then there were some smaller stuff here which I decided not to show because it's good improvements, but I wanted to focus on the three big building blocks that we had, and this is the comfort functions I just discussed with you guys. This is the more efficient scheduling of new production orders with the enhanced add-all and add-all including alternative options, and this is the capability to take out production orders from the automatic scheduling that don't have or that have components without a promised receipt date. And this is what we worked on this release. There are exciting things we will work on in the next quarter. So in a couple of months, maybe shortly before the elections in Lyon, we will run another webinar where I will present to you what, guys, we will have been doing in the third quarter. But for today, this is the update on what we did in the last quarter, what we just shipped. I'm pretty excited on the progress we are making, especially with the VAPS. As said, the VPS is almost done. There are some subtle things that we always can do better or differently, but the VPS almost done. With the VJS, we expect also to add additional functionalities going forward, but we recognize that we also had to do a lot of internal work and bug fixing, and we spent the time that we had in Q2 on scrubbing the product internally and getting rid of a couple of bugs. So I see that now there is a question, two questions, one question with 4 sub-questions. First, how can we see a record in Business Central of changes made to production orders from simulations? Second, what do red and gray diamonds mean in production order view? Third, when can we have a full list of icon shape and color meanings? It is not in the manual. 4, what is the new report in VAPS 114? It is mentioned in the release notes. I would think, Graham, at least 3 of the 4 questions relate to existing functionality today. I want to focus on new functionalities. So we will answer all these questions in an email, but some of the information here are known to everybody here on the call. So I suggest we will send you an email afterwards, but thanks for asking. As said today, I wanted to focus on new functionality, and your question relates to a lot of existing functionality, and this will be handled and discussed afterwards. So with this, if there is no more questions, then I would really like to thank you very much for your attention. If we aren't connected on LinkedIn, then please connect with me on LinkedIn. And if by chance you think it would be fun to have a conversation about Business Central and manufacturing with me, then also get in contact, because then we can meet up for my podcast, which is the Business Central Manufacturing Show. I recently did a couple of really nice conversations with some of you guys. We are now in the process of pre-processing them, and we'll publish them over the course of July and August. But if you want to become a guest in the Business Central Manufacturing Show because you have something to share about Business Central and manufacturing, then please let me know, get in contact, and we set up a date and a time, and we will make it happen. And with this, thank you very much for now. Thank you very much for your interest in our extensions. And if you have a suggestion, if you have a question, here are my contact details. I'm really open to discuss, open to engage, open to listen, because most of the things we develop actually come from suggestions that you made. And with this, again, thanks for now. If you weren't on summer vacation yet, wish you a pleasant summertime. Have some fun, do some exciting stuff, and then we meet again in a couple of weeks for the next webinar, and then in around 3 months' time for the next What is New in VAPS, VPS, and VJS webinar. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.